Morning all. I'm really thrilled you guys are enjoying the classic games that have been covered recently. From the Immortal game yesterday, that put me in a 19th century mood actually for my club match in the evening. I was playing against Johan Whitman in the Middlesex League, so we played at Muswell Hill, home match, and Johan was playing for King's Head, the mighty King's Head, who have won this league quite a few times. They had quite a strong team last night, and this was the board 2 game. And okay, he's at the moment he's 198 and I'm 197, so not too much difference rating wise, but he's a very dangerous player who I've been lucky to beat in the past, and I think I was very lucky last night in many respects during the game. Okay, so I kicked off with e4, and after e5 I was a bit wary actually about playing knight f3 because he's got various aggressive systems. He was next to me in the Nigel Short Simmel. We both lost that, but he played a very aggressive system there against Nigel Short. I think maybe Schliemann. I didn't really fancy that without knowing too much theory. And I thought, okay, what about the Vienna? And then I had this thought, I've seen an Andrew Martin video in the knight c3, knight c6 system, because after knight c3, actually, the two key knight moves represent really different ideas, if you can play f4 or not, or the danger associated with playing f4. Unfortunately for me, if I want to play f4, actually I think it's preferable for black to play knight f6 overall. Unfortunately for me, after knight c3, the Vienna, which I did choose, Vienna game, so knight c6, so I'm playing in the style of Steinitz pretty soon. We're getting into the Steinitz Gambit territory. I play f4, and unfortunately for me, he played an absolutely brilliant line, which I think is the start, basically, with engine analysis. You could consider it, I think, a refutation actually of the Steinitz Gambit, which has been mentioned around the internet on various websites and wiki, and of course it's not popular nowadays. Basically, he took the pawn, which I think is the very strongest continuation, calling my bluff. Now, of course, it introduces queen h4 as an idea, because there's no g3s, because it takes, you know, the rook. Pretty nasty stuff. And the problem is, for me, that I think 2 seasons ago I did play this as well, and I played knight f3, and all black does is play g5, but this is also other gambit territory, and wiki has a good page on it actually. This kind of gambit territory, let's have a quick look. Instead of d4, so say knight f3, g5. Now an engine suggestion here actually is h3, which maybe is not that bad. If white wants to try just to avoid immediate disasters with g4, it will take time to play h5 and g4 because there will be a pin on h8. So h3, I know it's an engine suggestion, it's not that crazy. I looked at this line with an engine, and the idea, you can try and wriggle to castle queenside, but you are like a pawn down here. But maybe this is better than some of the other positions you could get, this sort of position. Maybe with, you could argue, a little bit of pressure on the queen side. It's just an engine line. But let's go back. The official lines, there's an official sort of gambit in this. After knight f3, g5. Knight f3, g5, h4. So say g4. Now, where can the knight go? To g1 or g5? Okay, say it goes to g1. Then this is looking not bad for black, actually. I think white could end up getting smashed in this engine line anyway. It doesn't look that good. King safety. But instead of h4, there's also bishop c4, not playing d4, because that's going to be undermined anyway with g4, and often, you know, it's going to be black dominating d4, and that sort of is reminiscent of Fischer's bust to the King's Gambit, which is no coincidence. Of course, some King's Gambit lines are being shared with the Vienna. You've just inserted knight c3, but you're still playing f4, the King's Gambit move. But the important thing here is not to play d4, just to play this bishop c4. And after g4, don't bother moving the knight. Clearly, you can't move it to g5 anyway. You don't really want to move it to g1. You just castle here. And after g takes, queen takes f3, this actually has a name, according to Wiki. The Hamp-Museo Gambit. Or, you could call it the Vienna Hamp-Museo Gambit. Okay. So, and Wiki indicates, as with its close relative, the sharpness Gambit, white sacrifices the knight on f3 in return for a powerful attack against the black king. It is named after the Austrian theoretician Karl Hamp and is classified under ECO code C25. The Du Bois variation continues actually with knight e5, which clearly attacks the queen and bishop. Queen takes f4, which for the knight to take on c4 would allow mate. So here, queen f6, that's Du Bois variation. From an engine point of view, this variation, let's have a quick look. Black is basically giving back a piece, or is it? No, rook f6, there's knight c4. You put this, so you have to do something about that. Pardon me. Check, and black stands better according to engine evaluation here, but significantly not that significant, just minus 0.20. So there's life in some of these lines. If we follow this a little bit, I don't know. So it doesn't seem that hugely much better from that from an engine point of view. So basically, after e takes f4. This knight f3 is asking for the sharp g5, which is one benefit really of playing knight c6, that your queen is not blocked from the knight, so that supports the quick g5, g4, which will undermine d4, and this diagonal is still dangerous. This pawn's dangerous for fg if queen h4 does happen. So it changes the whole scenario, basically playing knight c6 instead of knight f6. Okay, so I'll put the PGN of all this in the description of this video, so it's going a bit on a side tour, but let's go into what happened, which is the Steinitz Gambit. So d4, queen h4 check, king e2. Now I'm a little bit confused. This transformation of Steinitz's style from being a tactical hacker player to a positional player, realizing all of a sudden the importance of weaknesses, knight maneuvers, the two bishops, the center, and other stuff. That transformation made him, Steinitz, an almost unbeatable player later in his career. But earlier in his career, he was a kind of hacker like everyone else in the 19th century. By the way, in relation to Anderson, that German master for the Immortal Game, according to ChessGames.com, he has 11 all with Anderson. And he's played the Vienna against Anderson, but Anderson didn't play so vigorously, you know, just playing after f4, d6 sometimes. He had his own, not d6, sorry, early bishop c5. There were other lines to play anyway. But this, I think, represents a really critical variation of the Steinitz Gambit. And basically, some authors like Jeremy Silman have written about this, but basically echoing the Steinitz idea here is a little bit outrageous, that the king can be a fighting piece, and if you assume the queens will come off, then the king can participate in the endgame apparently, either on the queen side or the king side. So it's keeping it at work, the king here. However, there is a very strong counter to this, a counter gambit, which unfortunately for me was actually played by my opponent. Your can play d5, and really black is focusing on accelerated development, castling queen side, lots of tactical vulnerabilities in my game. I wasn't really enamoured with ED here, or e5. I didn't want to give up squares and this d4 will still be weak and giving up f5. So I played knight takes d5, inviting the check. And after knight f3, black simply castles queenside. And I think this position might actually be completely lost. This position here. I play c3, which is one of the most often played moves here. After f5, it's a slippery slope because this knight's getting undermined as well as white's king safety issues. It's a very slippery slope here with the king on e2. And I kind of regretted playing it, and I thought, I'm going to be the first to lose this, and I'm not going to be picked for the team again if I lose this in like 12 moves. These thoughts went a little bit through my mind at this point. But then I thought, hold on, there was the Andrew Martin video on YouTube where he beat Michael Adams, the current British champion in the club match. The thing is, in that game, Adams had played something else, a completely different system, and White did sort of get a reasonable position from the opening. But here, I think this really is a forced loss for White. Just to demonstrate, like King d2 here instead of what was played, which was Queen d3, I think absolutely collapses, but I haven't actually checked this earlier. But let's just check it out now. So I'm attacking the Queen in response to the threat of here. But as I thought, yeah, check. I think this collapses White. Because I think he just takes, and then he just takes here. And then we've got this hanging, and this attacked. But apparently, okay, there might be a move here, apparently, which is only less than a pawn. This is why it's knight g5. Okay, so what's going on here? Is it the knight f7 idea? So takes, knight f7, bishop d6, knight takes, say. Rook f5. Well, black's better. You're nearly a pawn up. Okay. So that's why I suspected Queen f2 was strong. I didn't go that far, but in my own analysis, I just didn't like after Queen e2 just taking an fe. That looked lost to me. So what I played looks actually like the only move, and apparently it is the most played move. Now here, he released the central tension actually, and actually there's a really great move. I think a lot more powerful. That's why I say I think this is unplayable for White. Instead of f takes e4, which is tempting as well, but just knight f6, which would accelerate again black's development, I think. So say knight takes, queen takes, and say I do take the advantage of the queen not being on h4 by king f2. White's position is collapsing with d4. I mean, this was part of the basis of Fischer's refutation of the King's Gambit, was something to do with d4. But take a look at this. Bishop takes f3, undermining d4. Now say g takes f3. Let's just quickly rule out, if we can, queen takes f3. Knight takes d4 would be pretty nasty here. So if king e1, bishop b4, so there's not too many options. If like this is just all over. This is hopeless. This is really unbelievably exposed for the king. The king's a fighting piece maybe, but it's also one losing lots of pawns, and White is 2 pawns down here for not much, and the king's still exposed to loads of checks. So that's not particularly pleasant, basically, that variation with knight f6 here. So say g takes is what I looked at earlier. Now again, bishop c5 seems to be a killer move here, unfortunately. Taking advantage of that pawn on f4, so bishop e3 is not playable right at this moment. But bishop c5 comes up as a killer move pretty soon, actually, on a certain depth. Bishop c5, then it's going up even more. So this could represent, with the help of Houdini, a refutation It seems as though white strengthened the centre, but bishop c5, I don't see what white's doing here. There's the strange move queen b5 considered, but you know, this knight d4 and stuff like that. You know, for example, let's just show that knight takes d4. It's all over. This horrible discovered check possibility is going to win the queen there. So say get the queen out of trouble with queen b5, but you know, bishop d4 is strong, takes is strong, takes, and with the king just exposed like this, this does culminate in a completely lost position, this variation. So that's really unpleasant stuff. So I think this represents, unfortunately, a refutation, it seems, of the Steinitz Gambit. I think this is a completely unplayable line. If we go back here, this line for white, I think, is technically lost. Once someone's seen the precise moves here, with knight f6, f5 and knight f6, keeping the tension, I think this represents a refutation, this bishop c5. Unfortunately. Okay. So anyway, thankfully for me, my opponent let me off a little bit off the hook anyway, with not too much, with f takes e4. And after queen takes e4, yeah, it does seem attractive that the queen and king are on a skewering line. But how to get in rook e8? You see, queen h5, there's knight takes f4 hitting the queen. There's no time for queen h5. Well, it seems anyway. Engine evaluation here, out of interest, is slightly better for black anyway. So with g5 or bishop d6 being moves. Now knight f6 is not as good here, actually, as before, because takes, and apparently bishop takes f4, and you see it's significantly different from before. So that aspect of just keeping the tension is quite amazingly different. How much stronger it is just to play knight f6 here. Okay, so let's go back. So on the game, so we have this position, and he plays g5, and okay. Actually, I play one of the stronger moves in the circumstances. I play bishop d2 because I want to sort of maybe have the option of evicting the queen and getting the rook controlling e1. So he plays queen h5, which clearly has the threat of rook e8. So I move my king, and it's important, I think, to move the king to the right place here. Is it going to be f2 or d1? So that's the big decision here. I thought there was something up with king f2 because I thought maybe takes in g4 and he's hitting d5 and he's still got queen h4s. I thought it might be safer over here, but let's just check that as well, that assumption. The best move for the king does mention king f2. So let's have a look. Bishop takes f3 is actually no big deal here. Okay, so g4, there's knight takes f4. That's always seems to be a rescue move, that knight takes f4. So check. And if white's not getting slaughtered, then this should be okay. Bishop e1. Okay, it starts to actually be better for white. Okay, so maybe king f2 might have been actually the best move here instead of king d1. And strangely, no, not strangely, so king f2. So what I played was king d1. Okay, there is another line. There's some lines I looked at earlier as well. Let's look at king f2 again. Now rook takes d5, queen takes, knight f6. Actually, I think this really exposes the white king. This rook takes d5, this position, I think I think the engine was wrong, actually. I didn't leave it long enough. Basically, this is getting to be absolutely diabolical for white, because of check, and now taking on f3, taking, threatening mate, and this is a totally lost position. Pardon me. So if we go back in this position, the real assessment of king f2 versus king d1, let's assume that this rook takes d5 is really strong, and that's virtually forced. Queen b3 is virtually forced, and then this is a forced loss, basically. The king moves, and then bishop f3. So it cannot be that bishop f3, that king f2 is working, if this is the case, unless the point is queen e6 check here. King b8 again. This is not good. So anyway, okay. So maybe my intuition is actually right, that king d1 is safer in some way. He let me off the hook here, though. He seemed to blunder quite badly in the circumstances by playing knight h6, which might seem attractive because it supports bishop f5, and later, you know, he's going to play bishop g7 and stuff. But actually, okay, so king d1, what is black's strongest here, you might ask? It's a technical, it's a very complex position, but actually d5 being undermined, funny enough, not the king at all. So actually doing a sort of counterintuitive move, queen g6, it starts to be clear that white's in real trouble. If I take my d5's in real trouble, the knight's stranded here, and if I play c4, well, d4's dropping off, so that's really unpleasant. You might ask, okay, hang on, what about bishop d3? That's refuted as well. Rook takes d5, and then queen takes d3. Ouch. So actually, you know, if he had played this, then also this busts king d1. So even the way he played it seems completely winning by force as well. It's only now that the evaluation changes actually with his next move. There's a weakness of the last move. So I wonder if you can spot the weakness of the last move, this knight f6, and how I pounced on it if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, all of a sudden this knight on d5 can actually be useful, not in this position, knight f6. And there's an evaluation shift after this to being okay for the first time in the game. When I say okay, I mean okay, less than half pawn disadvantage. Okay, so that's what I mean by okay. But after bishop takes f3, I think he made things worse. Queen f7 would maintain some advantage, and I think we were both confused by a variation which I want to test now with this variation, as though this was unplayable because of knight takes g4, and we were both looking at knight takes g5, and this is something I really wanted to analyse. So check. We were looking at king c2 in our post-mortem. Apparently king e2 here. We didn't even consider that. King e2. We were both considering king c2 in our post-mortem analysis after the game, and we thought at the time queen d7 was winning, or close to winning, but then later it depends if this knight can be got back. Okay, so say bishop d3, bishop d6. Okay, apparently if the knight can be got back, then it's fine, and there's a move here or two which secures winning that knight, so it would be 2 pawns to the exchange, which would be fine apparently. Okay, in some lines initially we were examining, the knight was getting out with devastating effect. I wonder if I can recall just one of those 40 lines we'd looked at. So queen d7, I think we'd looked at queen f3, and this is horrible because of queen f5, that's a disaster, picking up the knight on g5. So with queen f4, that ticks all the boxes for keeping g5 protected. So knight takes, and I'm not sure. Okay, so there's other moves. This should be okay then. So we've done some miscalculations here. So this is okay, this variation, but it seems all a bit irrelevant if there's an even stronger move here technically. Now king e2 for some reason. So why does king e2 win in this position, or better for white? It's attacking the knight. If knight takes queen, then I'm winning the exchange. Rook e8 I can afford to take. If check, takes, all of a sudden white's better picking up that f4 pawn. He was a bit worried about losing f4 in different variations. So let's go back. So knight f6. So that might have been playable queen f7 anyway. Okay. So bishop takes f3, and I'm on my way back now, I think, into the game, all of a sudden, after g takes. That important light square bishop, and now Steinitz's dream of exchanging off queens comes true for the king as a fighting piece. Now, after queen f7. I'm well back in the game here, because I can flick in a check, and which is one of the strongest moves, I think, and then queen e6, trying to get the queens off. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm going from one frying pan into another now without realizing it, after his next move, which I was looking in detail a little bit at queen takes e6, bishop takes rook d6. White should be okay here. I did look at d5 during the game, and here I did look at h4, undermining black's structure. And it seems I will be better if I can undermine this structure. Then this is going to be better for white. Bishop takes f4, and then d6 is a tactical target. This is fine. This is winning for white. So I was hoping for that, but unfortunately for me, he did pause quite a bit here and play bishop g7. And there is another frying pan still, because this king is still on the d file. It's only the bishop sheltering it a bit. And I thought I'd casually just take queens and casually play knight h5. From a strategic point of view, I didn't want this to create passed pawns in the future. But that's way off at the moment because bishop's covering it. So best in this position apparently would be to throw in the check, and of course not king c8 because of check and knight f7, and then king c2, and I'd be fine. So say this position, I should be fine anyway. But no, I go into another frying pan straight away by playing knight h5 on strategic grounds, but it wasn't actually that exploitable, this h5 and g4. I play knight h5, and the next frying pan, he does play a really good move here. There are two ways to sacrifice on d4 actually, to expose again the white king. Now he played knight takes d4, because if knight takes g7, there's knight takes f3, and that's really embarrassing on d2. But apparently bishop takes d4 is again, it's okay, we're talking about equal now. It's not that convincing, I guess. Say a casual move like rook f1, knight e5, and all of a sudden he's getting loads of pawns. He's already well, he's got 6 pawns already against my... He's getting another pawn, it seems, here. And my king's still stuck in the centre, so advantage to black again. But in the game, actually, he took with the knight, and I didn't spot this engine move, funny enough. I just snapped up the knight with c takes d4 as if I was playing checkers drafts. Kasparov wouldn't approve. So apparently I could just leave both pieces for the moment and I could just play the calm rook f1 here. It didn't occur to me. So it's more favourable now. Say he moves the bishop, takes. Okay, so in this position, apparently king c2, say taking on b2 to try and nab another pawn, rook a e1, and this is a good improvement on the game continuation. There's less issues here. Say knight e5, rook e4. There's less issues. I can even look forward to maybe doubling on the e-file. But in the game, no, I made sure I was in another frying pan. Unfortunately, I took on d4. The bishop takes d4. He's getting a third pawn now. And he would be better if I took with the king. Say check. And black's better. Apparently, from an engine point of view. He's got 3 pawns for the bishop. And my king's exposed. And he's got possession of the d file. And the knight's ready to attack f3. It's not looking that great. So basically I did play, I think, one of the better moves, rook ab1 instead. Moves the bishop back. And it's a really difficult position to play, unfortunately. I thought, well, at least I can try and attack b7 and maybe tap my king on b1 later. So knight e5, it also protects f3 from b3. So rook e1 now. He supports the bishop and creating menacing threats like c4. I wanted to make sure that this rook, okay, if it's disrupted from protecting f3, at least I can have some insurance policy against f3, so I played bishop g4. Apparently there, knight f6 was strong. Because of knight takes f3, there's rook e7, threatening some coordination on b7. Check. And this position should be okay for white, this position. So that was a tactical variation. The evaluation here is better for white. But no, I kind of in this position I played bishop g4, so that's inferior to knight f6 with that idea of knight d7. But also there's a simplifying idea anyway. If after knight f6, in this position, after knight f6, okay, what is the threat? If black, say, does another move, what is white's threat with knight f6? Is it to centralize the knight? Is it to do something tactical? Knight e4, okay, that hits g5, and is threatening also maybe knight c5 in some lines. Again, this isn't that easy to play just because there's a knight on e4, but maybe it's a little bit easier. The knight was out of the game on h5. Okay, so that's the key point there. So he stops the knight coming into the game to the e4 square with rook hf8. That's one of the reasons, I think, for that move. Bishop c3, and this knight's really dangerous now. Knight c6, because it's threatened now to come to d4, as well as these c4 threats. So I didn't really like my position, and he had maybe a better move here, knight c4. So say knight g7 here, check, knight takes g4, bishop takes, rook f7, and this position, I think black's slightly better here. Oh no, white's slightly better, okay, apparently, but okay. If the knight's getting back to f5 here, it's not so bad. Alright, so maybe some of the worst is over at the moment. So I double rooks, which might not be the best, and a4, as though a5 might be a threat in the future. But this is quite a powerful move, rook fe8, trying to win another pawn. So I play rook e1, whoops, rook e1, to parry that rook e2 check. He takes on c3, so we get some simplification now, but he's got the option just to take on h2, which I think from an engine point of view is the best move. I play king d3 to at least fulfill Steinitz's dream of the king becoming a fighting piece. The king's employed maybe to go over here or to help mate the opponent's king, not like that, but like this. But unfortunately there's king b7s for that kind of attack. So this flexibility to attack on the queen side or king side is demonstrated here, but really he could just take on h2 here. This pawn ends up being very useful pretty soon. It was his chance to take that pawn, maybe come back for a4 later. Black would be better with rook h2. So I blundered here somewhere. It was a tricky position, but black's better here. But where did I blunder, you might ask? Apparently a4 wasn't the best. It was a tricky position anyway. And before that, even rook fb1 wasn't the best. It's the weakness of the last move, isn't it? By moving the rook over there, I've just given him this menacing threat. So I keep the rook on e1 and play knight g7 here. I should be okay according to our engine friends. This position, the point is, say knight d4, okay, or rook b2 here, or rook b1. Can the knight reroute? Not yet, to either f5. Okay, rook e4. There's more control over the position. I'm not losing yet another pawn. Okay, and knight e6 is now possible. So say this position, it's bishop versus the pawns scenario, but it's much better than what happened, losing that fourth pawn. So anyway, so so he exploited the problem of the last move, the e file, pretty soon, especially after a4. Pounces on that e file. This was approaching move 30. We get an extra 15 minutes on this time control. It's quite a quick time control. So I contest the e file, or trying to, but I can't do much else. I can't take because of rook e1. So he's getting that e file back with a vengeance for rook e2. So thankfully for me, he went for the a pawn, which does seem quite attractive to get free connected past pawns on the queen side. But the king is a fighting piece, so king e4, and now all of a sudden if I can knock out this one and this one, then this one is important. So rook b4, he's starting to hurt his a pawn. So I've got this mission and he's got that one. So I take on g5. I was a bit wary here about playing knight f6. I thought h6, and I thought he might have had a perpetual. But let's just check that out briefly. I had offered the draw earlier to this, just before losing the fourth pawn, but I wasn't sure I wanted the draw here if I had some promise, or an easier to play position finally with the h pawn. But say check. I thought this was perpetual or something, but no. Apparently, can my king do something about f4? Oh, I see, king d5. That's the move I missed. I thought I was forced to keep protecting the knight, but apparently king d5 attacks c6. If check, then just king e6. Okay. So, but anyway, I thought it was more logical anyway. I didn't need to be in a rush maybe to take on f4. I just played this. I want to herd my h pawn. So he starts pushing his a pawn. I take. Okay, and I thought, again, I'm under pressure because his pawn is almost ready to queen. He's going to have rook b4s, rook b2s and knight b4. But there's a big move coming to the rescue in all this very soon, which makes its appearance. I have got this extra bishop, and I know I've said many times bishops don't help against passed pawns very much. We've seen many demonstrations of that. But here, thankfully, for me, seems to be the exception, where the bishop was especially useful in this position, in turning the tables, basically. After rook a1, He protects with knight b4 and is now threatening rook b1s as well as rook b2 and knight c2. But there's an incredibly powerful bishop move, which is like the only bishop move basically, which turns the tables. The bishop becomes a total hero here for the white position. Because before this it was looking really dicey. If you look at the engine evaluation change, about equal, and then heroic bishop move all of a sudden grows white's evaluation. Bishop f5, and you see that's shooting up. Bishop f5 controlling b1 and c2. So even though he's only one step away, and I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's four ahead, but I've slowed him down in his tracks, thankfully, on that side of the board with bishop f5. Otherwise, and this is better for white now. So did he misplay this? Knight d4 is suggested as a move, and a3. That looks about equal apparently. So knight d4 at least stop bishop f5s. h4. I don't know actually. What's going on here? c4. It's a tricky ending clearly. So bishop f5 might make an appearance here as well as a saving resource. It does in fact. It seems this bishop f5 is brilliant to have, even in this variation. Say coming down again. Okay, the two connected pass pawns are bringing back bad memories here for other games. Okay, but there's some tricks. It seems as though with the king on b8, there's bishop c2s anyway, and this pawn could actually be coming to the rescue. Be interesting to see how. So that just gets ignored. The bishop can take on b1 now, and this pawn can finally queen. This is hair-raising stuff. So offering rook takes and then check, then queening, and finally white's better again. So there's hair-raising endgame here, but in the game continuation, I was so happy about bishop f5 stopping things for a moment, and then it looked much more simplified now once he played knight c2. I thought the road is clear for my passed h pawn after knight f6. I don't need to waste time taking on f4. But I was tempted to here because I thought maybe the king could be useful and this pawn could be useful. King could usefully come and do stuff, so I did take on f4 here. And now a key blunder. He plays b5. I'm looking at the specifics of the position here again. This game was interesting because since that spreadsheet, if you look at the video Strategic Crush versus Playing the Position, there was a spreadsheet as part of that in the video description, and I think that was very useful for actually going in and out of strategic versus specific position thinking. So I'd urge you to check out that spreadsheet comparison of Strategic Crush versus Playing the Position, because I've switched into a tactical mode again to spot, well, I hope you can spot a very good move here after b5. Weakness of the last move as well demonstrated. 5 seconds. Knight d7 check, just picking up very important c5 pawn, and the knight's ready to come back to replace the bishop as the rescuer of the queen side after knight d3. It's looking a bit dire here because the knight's controlling key squares. I wonder about b4 instead of what was played, just briefly. I'm not sure that helps too much. Oh, there's another check to win b4 now. Okay, that might help explain his move, king d6. But after knight d3, if the king dares now to go to d5, I've got rook takes and then knight b4 check, for example. Rook takes and knight b4 check. So in the game, after knight d3, he resigned here. So it was a pretty epic battle in an opening which seems to be losing by force, which I'll probably never play ever again in a long game anyway. But it might be fun for blitz games online. But it seems this variation for black would appear to be useful as a clear refutation of the Steinitz Gambit. It's a dangerous statistically anyway on chess.com. It already favours black, but it seems it really is technically losing from an engine point of view after this f5, and the strong continuation, which wasn't played thankfully for me, knight f6, really does undermine white, with d4 collapsing pretty soon in that key variation we saw. But I was let off the hook a little bit with this fe and g5, and definitely after this move knight h6, my disadvantage was becoming minimalized. But again, into another frying pan. Instead of playing knight d7 check, the technical move wins versus the general move here. You know, playing the position versus general concerns about past pawn creation. But with the light square bishop, you know, g4 is not on the cards. The g file's mine as well. The g file is not on the cards for g4. So putting the knight there was just bad. With my king in the centre. So again, a second wave of attack, having to face loads of pressure again. And I did slip up to go 4 pawns down because I moved off the e file. So 4 pawns down. Thankfully he didn't take on h2, and then he went for this a pawn instead, which looks attractive to get free connected past pawns. And somehow this bishop f5 turned out to be an incredibly important and useful resource against the menacing threats in this line. So I managed actually to show some resilience here on the queen side. Of course, this tactic really helped. b5 was a bit over enthusiastic to get the free pass pawns working. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.